everybody. It is Katie Koestner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. This is Katie Koestner, and I am so pleased to introduce our guest of the day. Cheryl Spera is a fantastic yoga instructor, trauma-informed. I'm going to share a little bit about her bio, but kind of tell you where we're going to head. Before I introduce Cheryl, though, I remind our listeners to always do excellent work with self-care. Push pause at any time. You can always come back. If there's a moment where you just, freeze up, get some breath of fresh air, do a headstand, go eat some chocolate, whatever's going to satisfy your soul for the moment. Just be present in your own process of whatever comes up for you in each episode. So welcome, Cheryl. Cheryl, I'm going to share a little bit about your bio. So Cheryl Spera is a trauma-informed yoga instructor. She founded Higher Ground Recovery and Yoga. And this institution, I guess, provides trauma-sensitive yoga classes and works with behavioral health and substance use in the Philadelphia area, I believe. She herself is in long-term recovery from alcoholism. I know we're going to talk a little bit about that journey and where it started and how it started. So I'm looking forward to that. And then after 2 decades of recovery, there was a relapse, but then 5 more years later, I think Cheryl came to a really strong place, and yoga was a major part of that healing process for her. So welcome, Cheryl. It's so lovely to have you. You're in Philadelphia. For those of you who think about colleges, that there's a ton of colleges out that way. There's Haverford and Bryn Mawr. Swarthmore is kind of out there, Villanova, Eastern Cabrini. I can't remember all of them, but there's quite a few.
I took courses at several different colleges, some of, the ones you've named, Widener University, Delaware County, Community College, and just started to accumulate credits and eventually transferred everything into Penn State University when I was like 35 and got my bachelor's degree. Yeah, from Penn State. So.
Nice. And so I think, we were just chatting before we started about some of the ways in which you understood your appearance or people were perceiving you. And you mentioned bullying just now. How did that look, and where did it stem from? Or, what can you describe that for our listeners?
Well, I think, growing up, I was a pretty introverted person. I was never, I'll just compare my sister and I. My sister, she's 5 years younger, and she is very talkative, very outgoing, very friendly. And I was a little bit more reserved, and I'm the older sister. And so growing up, there was a lot of emphasis put on the way I looked. I was very objectified. And so from both parents, I received a lot of attention from the way I looked and other family members. And so between being pretty and being quiet, I was perceived as a snob or stuck up or, somebody who thought, these were the messages I got. I thought I was better than everybody, or I was conceited. My sister and I were just talking about this, like anytime we felt good about ourselves, we were considered conceited, So,
no.
Yeah. So throughout school, there was bullying from other girls. You know, a lot of it centered around boys. And, you know, which is a whole nother subject, being boy centered, man centered. Um, and, you know, it got to the point where I was tall, I was 5'9". And back in the
Mhm.
80s, we wore, you know, high heels to school.
Yeah.
Around here
That's
and little
great.
socks and tights. Yeah, we did. And so they would do things like put Amazon woman on my locker, you know, kind
Oh,
of corner me in the locker room. And that was kind of like around the time that I started drinking, you know, and it was when, you know, I grew up with alcoholics and very wild household. We had parties all the time. So I, you know, swore that I was never going to be like that. And, you know, once I started drinking, and I don't blame my alcoholism on anybody, but once I started drinking, it kind of felt like the answer. You know, I felt good about myself. I could talk to people, and I was really good at drinking. You know,
whoa, that's a bold statement.
yeah, I was really good at it. I had a tolerance and, you know, I was like, you know, it wasn't frowned upon drunk driving, you know, like back in the day. We just kind of, you know, everybody just did what they did. And, you know, there weren't as many laws and awareness around drinking and driving. And, you know, so I was always the designated driver, you know, which I probably drank more than everybody else, but I just had this crazy tolerance. And so the more I drank, you know, alcohol just kind of isolated me from my friends. They didn't really want to hang out with me anymore. And I found a boyfriend who liked to drink and party like I did. And we just kind of, you know, came together and he became my life. You know, I just started living with him around the age of 17 just to get out of my house. And, you know, there's drugs in my story too. It was the
Oh,
80s.
wow. Hmm.
Yeah. So, and I just remember like seeing friends and people I knew moving on with their life and doing normal things. And I knew that there was more for me, but I didn't know how to get there. You know, I was just so conditioned with this, you know, and then another important thing that happened was I started to gain weight. I didn't look pretty anymore. You know, I kind of, um, stopped taking care of myself, you know, and I was no longer um, the you know the family kind of hero or person that they put on a pedestal, you know, and so I got a lot of kind of I felt like I didn't get the approval from my family that I used to
Hmm.
get when I was younger and more attractive. So as I does that
It,
make sense? Like
it does.
as I
Yeah.
started to change in my addiction, the instead of like meeting me with compassion and offering help, my family became angry at me, towards me.
Well,
So
when you're talking about through these things, Cheryl, a couple things I'm thinking in my head. One is, you described getting a lot of attention for your physical appearance,
yeah,
and then but you sort of made that sound like it wasn't a good thing. I mean, it
yeah,
sounds like it was a double-edged sword. Like sometimes you're the Amazon woman, and sometimes you're maybe being praised for being pretty.
yeah.
How did that go? Were other women, other girls mean to you for how you looked, or was it like
You know,
I'm curious more?
I don't think it was very obvious, you know, like it wasn't said like, I don't like you because you're pretty or whatever.
Mhm.
You know, that was just a part of it. I think, you know, because I was very introverted and quiet. And I
Mhm.
also started, you know, I, I would say like acting out with boys and being extremely promiscuous, which added to people not liking me,
Oh
you know,
gosh,
in high
right.
school. Yeah,
Mhm.
so it was a really, you know, you asked me how I navigated that, like being
Mhm.
pretty and attractive is a bad thing, and it was for me, it was a bad thing, because it meant that I was not approachable. There was nothing, like I felt like I had nothing inside to offer. And the
Mm.
only thing I really had was the way I looked. And if I smiled and I was cute, then everything was going to be okay. So when I started drinking and all of that went away, I felt really empty. I had no idea who I was. I was very broken. Like I relied so much navigating life through being attractive. Um, when I was in my alcoholism in, my late teens and early 20s, I felt like I had nothing,
Oh gosh.
everything was gone.
Mm-hmm.
So um, I just ended up going to I went to therapy a couple times, and she sent me off to a treatment center for adult children of alcoholics. And it happened to be at a rehab, and they were like, we're going to keep you. And I said, for what? And they said, well, we think you have a substance abuse problem. And I was so angry. I thought, me, how can I have a substance abuse problem? Like all these people around me and all this craziness, like my alcoholism kind of paled in comparison to the adults in my life. But I
Mm-hmm.
ended up going to treatment, and that was the beginning of my sober journey back in 1988.
Okay. And this point, you're living with the boyfriend, and but
Yeah.
then you went into a residential program.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
And how long were you there?
I was there for 30 days.
Okay.
And yeah, I was there for 30 days, and I left treatment. I moved back home with the boyfriend,
Mm-hmm.
and that lasted about a month before he moved out and just decided that, he didn't want to live a sober lifestyle. He wasn't really into what I was trying to do with my life, and we parted ways, and that was kind of the end of that.
Wow.
And then I moved to Center City, Philadelphia, and started on my sobriety journey, and I met my ex-husband, and
Okay.
yeah, and then we had a bunch of kids.
Oh my goodness, Cheryl. This is like quite a life you have had.
We had a bunch of kids. We had 3 kids, and then we got divorced when they were really young. And so I became a single mom when my kids were 2, 4, and 6. And that's when I went back to Penn State to get my bachelor's degree.
Okay.
So yeah, and I
And what was
graduated
that?
at
Yeah, what
7.
was that degree in? Two, four. You said 2, 4, and 6? 2, 4, and 8?
Yeah, 2, 4, and 6 when
Oh
I
my
got
God, every
divorced.
2 years you're pregnant. Like you get a little bit of time and then you're doing it again.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
So when did you go to Penn State main campus and take classes there? Or
No, I went to Brandywine, which
okay,
is a
that's
branch of Penn
Adelaide.
State, Maine. Mhm. And my degree is in human development and family studies. So my goal was eventually, I really wanted to get a PhD and do research. I was really interested in that, but that wasn't in the cards at the time with
Three
my
little
kids being
kids.
so young. So
Yeah.
yeah, and so I started working as a therapist at a treatment center with adolescents in Chester, Pennsylvania, which was a really rewarding job. Loved it. And my kids started to get older. And then, then everything just started to fall apart in my life. And that was
Uh-oh.
around 18 years sober. So, um, yeah, so the relapse, happened way before I picked up a drink. And I don't know if you've ever talked to alcoholics, but it kind of happens that way. And
What
I
does that
started
mean?
acting out.
Yeah, what does that mean?
Huh?
Can you explain what that means?
Yeah. So for me, alcoholism, it's more about um, our behavior rather than the alcohol, right? And so for me, I was not living a life in recovery. I was just not drinking. So I was kind of
Mhm.
slipping back into old behavior patterns. And, the scary thing about that is, if you don't nip something in the bud, there's something else that comes along and then something else, and then things just start to pile on top of each other. And then eventually I picked up a drink. And prior to picking up that drink, I was acting out sexually promiscuous with men. I was self-harming. I was taking Klonopin, not as prescribed, which is like a benzo. It's like similar to Xanax, basically.
Is that a depressant or an upper? I forget. I have no idea.
It's it's
Or neither.
I would say it's in its own category, but it's more for like anxiety. It's prescribed for anxiety,
Okay.
but it's highly addictive and it has a very severe withdrawal. So the benzos and alcohol
So ben,
have withdrawal.
benzos help you relax or like chill
Yes,
out,
yes,
basically.
chill out.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. It's different than an opiate. Yeah, it's different than an
Hmm.
opiate. Opiate would be something like Percocets, heroin, fentanyl, that category of drug. Benzo is more like Xanax, Ativan, Klonopin,
Gotcha. Thank
just for
you.
a
Yep.
got it. So yeah, I was acting out and my life and eating disorder. We have to talk about that, eating disorder. So in order to, try to always get back, right, get back to something with my body. There's been like this whole war with my body, throughout my life. I, I was throwing up, I was self-harming, I was taking Klonopin, I was acting out sexually with men. My kids started, two of my children started in their own substance use. So I was trying to manage that. My youngest son went to live with his dad. I had to sell my house. They repoed my car, and I'm working in a rehab. And my daughter's friends ended up being in my group. And so there was like conflict of interest. And so there were all kinds of like every domain of my life was just kind of crashing in on me. And one day I drove past a bar and I saw a Coors Light sign. And I never had Coors Light because I got sober when I was so young. It was like 20 years later. And I pulled in and I drank that beer, and it was like the best I had felt in 20 years. I felt like so much relief from that first drink. Um, and that was the last time I felt that sense of relief. And it took me 5 years to get sober after that. And I created complete crisis of my life. I really caused damage to all my relationships with my children, my family, made some really bad decisions, put myself in a lot of harm's way. And I'd gone to a few treatment centers. That
Cheryl,
didn't
you know
work,
what? Wait, before you keep going, my goodness, I'm just like
yeah.
sitting here listening and thinking about two things come to mind immediately. One is, my goodness, you are so bold and honest to just lay this whole life of yours on the table for us. Like for me, it's overwhelming to hear your
Yeah.
transparency and your truth, and like talking about the harm you did in such a brave and honest way. I think, I mean, just being able to say I did harm by things that I chose or my addictions is a brave, bold thing for us to say,
Hmm.
um, about anything we do in life where we're not either taking good care of ourselves or in the process hurting others. And I'm just overwhelmed. Like it makes me want to cry. It's beautiful and powerful and just deafeningly sad too. I just wanted to sit with what you said, because if our listeners were listening closely, it's like, oh my goodness, you are just, I feel like I was just privy to your brain and your heart all at once. I don't even know how to describe how I'm feeling, because it's like really hard. It's hard. It's hard to hear it. No, it's like,
Wow. Thank you.
it's brave.
Thank you.
It's brave. It's really brave because
Wow.
if your
Thank you.
kids or your parents or your sister or all the people around you can also, what I'm also hearing you say is like there were a lot of people hurting you too. Like even, and I don't know if they've ever owned up what they did the way you
Mhm.
just did. You know what I mean? Like if you're waiting around, and what I'm thinking for our listeners is if any of us are waiting around for an apology, we're not going to get it, and that's pointless.
Yeah.
And the power of how you clawed your way out of those dark spots. And I'm also hearing like, oh my goodness, random men, like there's this constant, it must have been so hard and frustrating to be treated the way you were in high school. And I was thinking about a woman, a girl, because I'm not that much younger than you. And there was a middle school, I won't name her, but she was perfect, and she reminded me exactly of you. Everyone thought she was and her, well, I don't know if I should say this, but maybe she's out there somewhere. Her last name was literally Sleeper. Her last name was Sleeper. And everyone started making fun of her
Uh-huh.
because she was more developed and she was tall and skinny and perfect. Like everyone thought and she was probably 5'9". She was taller than all of us. And everyone was like, Sleeper sleeps around. And I feel like her whole image of herself was probably what you were going through. Like and I feel really guilty because I was so
Yeah.
introverted and
Sounds.
also traumatized with my own stuff. I was not in a place where I could ever befriend or go up to her and say, wow, those kids are really mean to you. And it was everywhere. She was engulfed in bullying and harassment.
Mhm.
And I wanted to say, like, I think there are other women who will relate to your story for sure. And I feel like I know one, even though I'm meeting you today, but I feel like there are no one thinks about the damage done by objectifying women, and you're pointing that out so beautifully well in our conversation. So I'm sorry, I just wanted to talk and tell you what I was thinking about what you were saying. So you knew
Yeah,
I was really moved, and I was really absorbing
appreciate
it and
that,
taking it in and
Katie.
thinking about your life, like trying to picture the whole thing. And all those men, all those random men. You said you were doing
You
the
know,
hookups, but they were
they're
like happy to do it. I'm sure
ugh,
they were like, "Yeah, I'll buy you 5 more drinks," right?
yes, they were.
I can imagine. And then I'm also thinking how
Yeah.
exhausting it must have felt to have that addiction and go mentally every single day is like a treadmill, the same thing over and over, and same concerns and worries. And I don't know, I'm guessing. I'm not the therapist, but I'm just guessing.
So, you know, a couple things you said, and thank you for that. A couple things you said, for me, accepting responsibility for all of it and just trying to find my part in something has been so liberating and has given me so much freedom. And it's given me, control back in a lot of ways by, accepting and owning my part in things, and that's not to say that I wasn't a true victim in some circumstances, but, you know, I have to really try to stay out of self-pity and not get caught up in that, because, you know, a lot of a lot of my trauma after moving out of my house, from being a teenager was self-inflicted.
But do you think though, Shaw, you were also leaving because it was so toxic at your house too?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was very toxic.
So even though you say like you're leaving one toxic thing to have a less toxic thing, right? I mean, sometimes like when I think of how complex traumas are, like sometimes I'm thinking about how when we have this one, especially if something that happens when we're really young, it our innate sense of self says like, this is hell, let's leave. Or let's figure out another option. And we don't even necessarily, when we're young, have
Yeah.
the words or the cognization of what this trauma is, but we know it's not good. So we just figure out like how can we get out? And you use whatever tools are either, and I feel like you use the tools that you had. You used your attractiveness, you used, whatever you had to and if a boyfriend comes along, I think that's sorry, I just thought of something else. I think a lot of, I'll say men, maybe there's better men now, but I don't think a lot of other men know that we as women, even though they think we're manipulating them because we're pretty or whatever, we're using our the fact that we're objectified as a form of, we can use that as a tool. Men never had that, and maybe that's a good or a bad thing, but I don't think they necessarily understand that it's not glorious to go out and sleep with men or feel pretty and objectified. Like, it's not a form of power. It's not an equal form of power at all. I don't know if that resonates with
No, I felt, to be honest, I felt numb. I felt really numb. And I don't even know, if you would say, well, why did you do those things, or why did you act like that? I couldn't tell you why. I think I was looking for an answer, and maybe I was going to find that in a man. Maybe I was going to find that, in my appearance, or, I just wanted to feel better, and nothing was helping me feel better. So there was a lot of like emotional numbness. I didn't really have any highs or lows. I was just kind of like going through life. But I know that, I would still attend my support groups like weekly, and I would smile, walk in and be like, hey, how is everybody? And they actually, some people called me Smiley, because I smiled all the time. And I was literally like so numb and so shut down and acting out in so many ways. Nobody had any idea how much pain I was in, but I could put a smile on and walk into a room and you wouldn't know anything was going on with me at all. So that was scary. And like, I think I was talking about before, like, the 2 years prior to my relapse, the red flags, like, I've been sober now for 10 years, and, there are little things that start to kind of pop up, like, I start thinking about food more, and it becomes like, obsessive thought, or I start isolating, or maybe I start, doing something else. So, I try to nip these little things in the bud as they come up, and try to be as, and I also found like having a voice, which is really cool. I'm on this podcast because I remember, just going to tell you this, like before I got sober, I was sitting, I rented this house, and I was sitting in my bedroom, and I would drink like, I don't know, 9 to 12 beers every night before bed.
Well, that's either if we were trying to make you funny, I would say that's a lot of hydration. But I think the exact opposite.
And I remember, I was in recovery for 20 years prior to that relapse. So I knew all the literature. I could recite whatever, I could quote different books. And, and I remember thinking, I'm never telling my story again. Like, I'm totally okay with sitting in here in my room, drinking myself to passing out every single night. Like, I just surrendered to my alcoholism. I really did. I just was like, this is going to be my life from now on. And I remember thinking about sharing my story, and I thought, I'm never sharing my story again. And part of my healing has been obviously through yoga, but also having a voice. And I think teaching yoga has been able to help me find a way to have a voice, but just be here with you, sharing my experience and, what's all about yoga is really amazing. So thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah,
I see it.
it's an honor, like I said, Cheryl, because you're helping so many people, and I like how you said you're so very clear about like describing these little triggers, and I like using the word trigger because we talk about trigger as a word a lot when it comes to trauma, but I also never really thought about all the triggers or the little brain moments that put us on the brink of also going back into other dark places like addiction.
Yeah,
Because you can, a trigger can bring us into high trauma from re-seeing or
yeah,
feeling the abuse. But I think it also is alcoholism or other addictions are also a form of abuse of ourselves. So I
absolutely.
think that's hard or an interesting way to think about the parallels between
Yeah.
these issues. Um,
So, in trauma sensitive
yeah, I was just going
yoga,
to ask you about it.
so so we basically like so the yoga that we offer in treatment centers, we utilize trauma sensitive methodology, which was developed at the Center for Trauma and Embodiment in Brookline, Massachusetts. So I've done some trainings with David Emerson, but I don't have my certification in trauma sensitive yoga, but I've done some trainings with David Emerson and learned the methodology. And we kind of combine that methodology with recovery principles and we bring them together. So in treatment centers, like instead of using the word trigger,
Mm-hmm.
we would say activating,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the word trigger could be a trigger.
Mm-hmm. Right. That's
Yeah, so trauma sensitive yoga really thinks about like all aspects of the yoga practice from the moment you walk in, including the space, the lighting, where the windows and doors are, the language that we use, the different types of shapes that we offer to our students. And, one of the things that I really love about trauma sensitive yoga is authentic connection, right? True authentic connection with others. So in my yoga classes, there's a lot of conversations, and just I think just being able to um, provide space for other people to have a voice and to make healthy choices for how they want to move in their body, and building a community through that has been extremely rewarding for me. And I just love, love it.
yeah. So
Yeah.
let's talk. I mean, in the last 5 or 10 minutes we have, why don't we talk
Yeah.
about what that was really helpful. What does your practice look like? Do you teach many classes? Is your studio or?
Yeah. So higher ground, after getting my master's degree, I knew I wanted to started either have a women's recovery house that was based in complementary health approaches such as yoga and mindfulness, or like I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I formed my LLC. I created a website and I had always taught yoga. I trained with Transformation Yoga Project, which is really where I got a lot of my training for trauma sensitive yoga. And Transformation Yoga Project shut down during the pandemic, so they were no longer offering classes in treatment centers and prisons. So the founder of TYP contacted me and said, hey, if you're interested, go ahead and see if any of these treatment facilities want to start back up again, because we're no longer going to be offering classes. So I reached out to a few and we started there. And then we just grew our programming, and now we're in about 15 treatment centers in Philadelphia
Wow.
at various locations. Yeah. So we teach yoga for the City of Philadelphia Office of Addiction Services. So we're in some of their recovery houses and sober livings. So we're everywhere from like Northeast Philadelphia all the way down to Delaware County. We have a program, 2 programs in the state of Delaware. We're in Montgomery County, some of the surrounding counties in Philadelphia. So we did that. I have a team of maybe 12 teachers, and they're also all trained. And we're like, we need a home base. So I opened the studio last July, and it was just kind of like a home base for, all of the activity that we were doing all over the Philadelphia area. And we opened the studio, and it's traditional yoga classes, but everything we do at our studio is trauma informed. And we offer recovery yoga every Friday night. We offer scholarships for people who are coming out of treatment centers and want to go to yoga. So it's really important to me that the studio is a community space where people feel safe and they can come and practice. So like accessibility, inclusiveness is, really part of our mission, to make it accessible and inclusive for people in early recovery or long-term recovery. So we try to support people in that way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's fantastic work.
Yeah.
I wish there were similar programs all over the country. Do you know if you could clone yourself, and have you tried other cities?
Yeah, so that's maybe something we were thinking about expanding. I know there are other organizations like the Prison Yoga Project and that do similar work, but they're more in prisons. Working in treatment centers is really unique, because you have to understand your population. Some people in treatment centers are still in detox. Some people have health conditions that, precludes them from practicing yoga. There's, people from all different backgrounds, different levels of trauma, different, everybody's different, right? And they're at different stages. They could be day 1 or they can be ready to leave treatment, 28 days later. So it's a very unique experience. Each facility is very unique in how they offer their yoga programs. So I don't know if there is another organization that does it.
No, I'm not familiar, but it could happen, Cheryl, someday.
Yeah.
It could. It sounds like it should too.
Yeah.
It just takes one of our listeners to be like, I want to do that, and go get mentored by you, and then do it all over again. It's such a powerful. So I guess maybe some of the last things. Some of our listeners are really well informed on, the practice of yoga, or what that looks like and how it's helpful. But maybe you could share 2 or 3 ideas for our listeners who aren't so familiar about how yoga connects the mind, body, breath, and whatever you feel would be helpful for our listeners to know about the practice.
Yeah. So, yoga is, has been, a philosophy and a way of life for me for a long time. And, I feel like when a person's ready for yoga, it kind of calls to you, and you come to the mat, and, we all have this idea of yoga. So many people tell me, I'm not flexible, I can't do yoga. I hurt my arm, I can't do yoga. And I always say, well, can you breathe? Yes, I can breathe. And you can do yoga, if you can breathe. So sometimes, we have to let go of any expectation we have before we come to the mat, right? So we set aside the fitness goals. We set aside thinking that, this is going to be our spiritual awakening. We kind of just come to the mat with a beginner's mind, and we start with the breath. and I like to just simply observe the breath. And so I feel like, if anybody has any kind of addiction or alcoholism, yoga is a way to help bridge the disconnect that happens, the mind-body disconnect that happens when you are in an addiction or in alcoholism. Because, addiction is about disconnection and yoga is about connection. Like yoga, the word itself means to bring together, to yoke, to unite. And so once we start to come to the mat and we notice the breath, we notice sensations in the body, we just might even sit there and notice I'm feeling the breath in my chest, or maybe I'm feeling it in my belly. Maybe I'm not feeling it at all, and we start to turn inward and just notice sensation, right? We start to become connected to our body. So things like different cues, like hunger cues, thirst cue, sleep cues that we have when we're healthy. When we're in an addiction, we don't really notice those things. We're like, I'm not hungry, I'm just going to keep drinking. Or we don't want to eat because, we'd rather drink. Or, if you're on different types of substances, you don't want to sleep. So we lose all regulation with our body. So yoga, trauma-sensitive yoga is a great way to do that because we really emphasize the inner experience rather than actual shapes or postures, so we might move into a warrior shape, but while we're there, we notice, how are my feet feeling? How does my breath feel here? What does it feel like to have my arms out to the side like that? And so it can be very vulnerable too, just even to open your arms up. Some teenagers, in some of our programs struggle with just opening their arms up.
That's amazing.
The heart chakra and the vulnerability that happens from even just opening up. So it's a great opportunity to start turning inward and start, noticing sensations. And then we go from there.
That's perfect. That's so well said, Cheryl. I think it's a nice invitation that sounds accessible to all of us.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like a competition or any sort of requirement. It just sounds like
you're not getting an award. This is not the yoga Olympics. You're not getting an award. So,
right.
Laughter is such a big part of it too, like play and laughter and not taking ourselves so seriously and just being able to, be present with each other on the mat. But, that requires trust and safety. So, that's what I hope that we're creating at our studio. I think it is.
I'm certain it is, Cheryl.
Yeah.
Certain. Well, I guess I just want to remind, first of all, thank you. It's a glorious, a heartening conversation. It really touched me, and just, I could listen to your calm, steady conviction and how you talk about your life, and I can see the joy now where you are. You're in a much better, healthy place, and I think it's because all that stuff back here, you're good with it now. Like it's not the clouds that they're back there. But that, I don't feel like you hid them away. I also think that, when I'm listening, I think what's nice is you're not trying to hide. You're not trying to hide your past. You are trying to heal from it, and as we all are. But I like when you acknowledge the dark places as part of who you are and who you are now. I think that too is more accessible. It feels doable. Than getting over something or trying to hide it away. That could get exhausting too, is, hiding our trauma or hiding the darker places in our life that could lead to more addiction. Just the exhaustion of trying to escape it. I like finding a way to integrate it. Thank you.
I just want to say, everything that I have learned, self-compassion, that has been the main ingredient to everything that I do. is compassion. I think if there was one thing that yoga brings to the table is learning how to take care of yourself in a very deep and meaningful way, So, yeah, I just wanted to say that.
So everyone can try it. And if you're in Philadelphia area, you can come visit Cheryl at her studio. But oh my goodness. Well, thank you again for spending some time with us, Cheryl.
I appreciate your time, Katie.
And for our listeners, please, again, take all this in, breathe some more, go find a mat and breathe on the mat. We do on Take Back the Night actually have a mini series where everyone can try Come to Your Mat. And, that definitely there's a free first session if you just want to give it a whirl. Also for our listeners, we are opening the Dear Katie Collective Shop. And certainly I'm going to put some yoga attire now everybody's wear. Everybody wears yoga pants all the time, right? I think that's the new thing. But we'll definitely put some good, yeah. Yeah. They're so comfortable. Why did we ever wear anything else? But anyway, I definitely encourage our listeners to take a tour of the shop and always know that you're not alone in your healing journey. And that is part of why we do the podcast. So, there are so many ways to thrive, so many ways to take the winding road that we're on, and other people have done it too, and they all do it in their own way. And, cobbling together all of these pieces might be the exact right fit. So anyway, thanks so much, Cheryl. I hope you enjoy. Yeah, namaste. Namaste. Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.